I've done this before, so I know it works. Oh, okay, let's see. It should let me do two, right?
Hello?
Hello.
Can you hear me?
I can.
Excellent.
Okay, I'm just putting Shane in the call right now. I've never
Yay.
I've never had a like three-person call, so let's see how this looks on my I've got you on my phone and I've got you on my like 32-inch monitor. So I'll probably be going back and forth depending on how it looks. So if I look like I'm not looking at the camera, it's because I'm probably looking at you on on my computer, which is better. I feel like you're sitting right here opposite me.
Excellent.
Oh,
I
here we
see
go.
Shane.
Okay, I see him
Yep.
too.
Hey, Erica. Hey, Jay.
Hello.
Hey.
Okay, I'm geeking out already. I can't believe it. Hold on. I'm trying to figure out how to mute my computer. It is really insisting that I hear the sound coming from my computer. I keep muting it and the volume keeps kicking back up. Like, what are you
Oh
doing?
man.
Okay, so thank you, first of all. I didn't know if just sometimes you just have to ask, right? If you never
Yeah.
know if someone might just say yes. And I've gotten a lot of no's in my life, so I always tell people like just ask. If they say no, they say no, but if they say yes, then awesome.
Yeah.
So thank you both for saying yes. Well, really, Jay, you're the one who said yes, and you said, "Can I bring Shane?" And I said, "Well, yeah."
Yeah. Well,
Thanks
I
for
I'm
think
not
that
going to
it's
say
an
no to
awesome
that.
opportunity.
Okay.
And
So the reason,
I see Sean just joined us. Yay! And CB's on.
yeah,
Ricardo's
thank you
on.
Hi.
everyone for being in the room. I'm so happy all of you guys are here. The reason for this is it's purely selfish, I want to say, because honestly, I could have just talked to you guys on the side and asked you all the questions I wanted to ask you. But I was like, you know what? We might as well let other people hear my questions because they might, be wondering the same thing about this amazing project that happened last year, that I literally found out last minute, and major props actually to Sean, because I went to Sean and I said, Sean, so a little birdie told me that there's this project going on. I have Top in Fiction. I know that it's going to be coming out. I think it wasn't even 48 hours. I think it was less than 48 hours when I reached out to him, and I actually said, there's not enough time for me to help you with this one. If you do it again next year, don't forget me, right?
Yeah.
And then I think it was Sean who came back to me and said, so if I could get you all the information like right now, do you think you could put something together? And I was like, "Oh, I will drop everything. You send it to me and let's see what
Yeah.
I could put." And I literally slapped that thing together in like 24 hours, getting all the information, I think, Shane, from you, because you had
Yep.
there was some of the artwork, and then getting it from Sean, and getting the list, because secretly I just wanted to know who was doing this. Like, that was my ultimate goal. I was like, who got asked to participate in this awesome thing? I want to know who they are. How can I
Yeah.
find out?
Right.
Oh, okay, let me ask around and see if I could get this magic list. And you guys gave it to me, and I was like, oh my God, I know who they are. So what we're talking about, if you're not aware, yeah, I'm hoping almost everyone in the room isn't aware, but last year there was this little thing that happened in November called the Substack Zone. And the Substack Zone was essentially paying an homage to the Twilight Zone. And I love the Twilight Zone. I have it playing 24/7 on my TV. So I'm, watching it off and on. I've, read all the backstories. I know all the things. So I love the Twilight Zone. And when I saw this was happening, I wanted to know, how it got started. And that's really my first question. Now that I've let out my geeking about this and let out the whole story, my first question is, how did the idea for the Substack Zone first come about? Like, whose idea was it? Who kicked it off? And how did you get 31 people, to come together? Because I'm envisioning this took months, if not a year, to put together. But I want to know from you guys, how long did this take?
Uh, All great questions. Let's see if we can start with the genesis of the Substack Zone. And that goes to Sean. Sean McDonald on his chat started asking, hey, what's your favorite Twilight Zone episode? And the thread just kind of filtered from there where people were talking about their favorite episodes. People were talking about, I really like, sort of this turn at this episode. And I'm, Erica, like you, I'm not a shy person. And so I just chatted him up in the background and said, um, maybe we can get some people together and maybe do a thing. And I did some quick research in the background and found out that in November of 1958, the very first pilot episode of The Twilight Zone had aired. And I thought, it's 66 years. That's in like a month. Can we put some people together for that? So Sean gets initial credit with, "Hey, this is a cool idea. Let me put a list together." And so he and I just created a spreadsheet. By the way, I teach companies how to project manage. That's what I do. And so I just sort of took the things that I do on a daily basis and teach people. And he and I just started like putting a spreadsheet together and saying, okay, what are all the things? Who are all the people that we want to work with? And I think, Sean, you can correct me, but I think we had 34 people on the list, and we got 31 to say yes. And so
That's
that
pretty good odds.
Oh, in the background, he and I were like 10% maybe. If we get 8 or 10 people who are, 5 or 6 people who are interested, like that's something, right? All of a sudden, 31, and even Nolan Green jumping in and saying, "I'd like to write some music for this." And so not only did we have music, we had writers, authors of different styles and different stripes all over. And then we had graphic designers, and that's sort of where Shane came in. And in the background, I'm going to hand it off to Shane because Shane actually started doing all the look and feel of everything while everybody was still crafting their stories and trying to figure out what they were going to do.
Right. And Shane, to talk about the artwork, because that was what caught my eye immediately first, where I said I was actually looking for you. And I think in looking for Shane, who I didn't know was doing the artwork, I just saw the people promoting their story and teasing it. I was trying to find out if I can find the person who's making the artwork, then I can find out my in. And honestly, that was, I think, what led me to Sean. I can't remember who it was who said, "Well, you need to ask Sean what this is all about." But really, like, tell me how the artwork came about because it's very obviously Twilight Zone forward. Like, you could take that and give it to someone, and they would assume that that's got to be a Twilight Zone episode.
Yeah. Well, for one thing, I just want to say I've got a repairman in this room with me. I'm trapped. I'm in a hotel. So there's a little background noise, so apologies for that. But to answer your question, Erica, I suppose, much or like many writers on Substack, I'm not a writer as a career. I'm not a career writer. I'm actually a visual designer by trade, and I've been practicing since I graduated college in 1998, to date me. And so, any project I come into, I'm just instantly drawn, to the visual side of things. And Twilight Zone is just absolutely rich with all kinds of, the typeface and the logo treatment and the crazy like spiral graphic and all of those things, just so interesting. And so as I started digging into the history of the Twilight Zone, just for the purposes of writing the story, I just got immediately attracted to the look and the feel of those old episodes, and I really wanted to recreate that for my story. And then I also just thought, just for fun, I put that Substack Zone logo together, and I was like, well, somebody had to make this thing.
Hmm.
It's such an obvious play, and I threw that out to the group, and it was really embraced, and everybody loved it and got picked up. A lot of fun to make.
So my question is now more geared towards each story. So was each story like, did you go through the 100 plus episodes of the Twilight Zone and basically tell every person like pick your favorite and and do a spin on it, or did you say like go wild? Like, was the point to pay homage to the Twilight Zone as a whole, or to really hone in on the ones that people might recall and remember, and just, give it a new coat of paint and bring it forward to today's way of storytelling? How did each story come to be, really?
Yeah, it's a great question. We did not ask anybody to pay like direct homage to an episode. What we did is we said, look, the Twilight Zone has a sort of a four-act structure.
Right.
There's the big setup at the beginning, then there's a commercial break, and then there's sort of two acts with commercial breaks in between, and then there's a twist ending. And so we gave everybody a document, a shared document that said, here's what everything looks like, just from a generic plot structure standpoint. Do what you want with it. Use it, don't use it, but sort of this is what we're going for. And so if you read through the 30 stories that were there as part of the Substack Zone, what you'll find is that people sort of made it their own, and they sort of shifted things around. So like William Pauly did his story in reverse,
Yep.
right?
Which
So he
was,
did the,
I just read it for like the fourth time,
it's so
because I'm
good.
just, and part of me inkling, just to hone in on his, was to read it in the order of the parts that it's
Uh-huh.
written, instead of in the parts it's presented, because I'm just
Yes.
and I've got to talk to William, I feel like, separately, just to go over how this was done. Like, did he write it part one through part six and then rearrange them, or did he rearrange them and then turn them into parts? But aside from that, like, yeah, like that one I think
Yeah.
was one of the more brilliant ones that I feel like I still have to read it again just to wrap my head around it, the
Yeah.
concept.
You're absolutely right. And actually, Will has on his Substack, if you're a member, I think he's got it behind a paywall, but you could read sort of his backstory about how he came up with the idea. And it's just a lovely way of thinking, like seeing his thought process and looking through everything. But you'll also notice that like Sean's a good example. Let's see, where he did not adhere to an act structure. It's sort of almost like a one act play, a single person on stage. In case in his case, it's the maestro is looking out at this audience and sort of having this moment within it, as an orchestra conductor, and sort of realigning his expectations of himself, his life, what's going on around him, but it doesn't adhere to a structure. In a typical like a three act or four act play structure.
Mm.
So everybody sort of took their own version of it and made it what they wanted based on their storytelling style and the story that they wanted to tell.
So, jumping back a little bit, how did you come about who you chose? Like, who the chosen ones were? Because I went deep into the back of my brain, and I was just like, okay, a little jealousy and envy, because I said, well, why didn't they ask me? Like, what was I doing that I, one, they didn't know I love Twilight Zone, and two, I must have been really busy, or three, they just had these awesome people already in mind and they must have asked them a long time ago. But it sounds like it came about like in early October to happen for November. So I'm assuming this was just, the mutual group that you guys all subscribe to each other. You guys all knew each other. You chat. You knew that they all loved. You don't necessarily have to love writing horror. It could really be just science fiction, or
Mm-hmm.
really any genre fits into a Twilight Zone episode. But
For sure. Yeah. So to answer your question, it was sort of the ever widening circle, right? And so I had people that I followed,
right.
and Sean had people that he followed, and then there was sort of the tangential overlapping circles, right? I think Shane, uh, you and I had interacted a couple of times on a story that you had done, uh, the spaceman falling. I've lost the name of the
Hu-
story.
Huddle jumping.
Puddle jumping, right. We had
Yeah.
interacted briefly, but it was sort of like these are interesting writers. These are people that we did not know truly the way that we do today. I'll speak for myself, but like I just chatted up Sean. I just chatted up Shane or let's see, Hannah, and like we sort of split the list up. Like, who do we think we know, or who have we
Right.
followed most closely, and who should reach out?
So when it came to the book, did you guys think that you were going to do that when you started this project? Was it just we're just going to do this project, push this thing out, and let that be that, or did it be, or because it went viral, if you want to call it going viral, to me it did. Did that prompt you to say, well, we should put this together in a collection and release it now as an ebook and a print book?
Um, we we did not make a hard decision at the outset that we were going to do that. It was very much like, hey, this is kind of interesting, and we sort of went round and round. The way that some of the stories were structured, where they had an intro monologue and and an outro monologue, is very Twilight Zone-esque, and probably falls too far into litigious category if we were to do it that way. So you'll notice that the stuff that's in the book and the ebook is edited differently, and it doesn't include those things. But we thought, oh, is this an interesting thing? Would people read this outside of the group um, that wrote it, and the people that really liked it online, or through Substack and other friends? And I think it sort of grew a little bit. And I actually think it was Shane who was like, hey, if we do a book, I really want to have a part in the layout and the cover design. And I think that really kicked it into high gear.
Hmm.
For
Okay.
sure. And I think I remember early discussions of the book. Jay said, I mean, at the very least, we could have something we could hold in our hands and make our mothers proud.
For sure.
So,
Right. No, I'm a very tactile person, so when I knew that the book was coming, I was like, when can I pre-order it? I already did it yesterday. I'm ready for it. I want to have it on my shelf. Like that's one of those things. Which leads me to my next question, which is, and I'm sure everyone is wondering, when is the next one?
Oh, that's a good question. Let's say
Well, or
let's
let
save
me
that for the end.
or let me say, will there be another one? Before
I
you
think
answer like that, but has that did that thought cross your mind? Because first the thought is, well, let's put it together and let's see if anyone bites and wants to do it. And then you find that everyone wants to do it, and so you've got
yeah.
this massive group, right? And then the next thing is like, well, maybe we'll put it into a book, and then now you've got this book, and I'm sure it's going to sell wonderfully. So now the question becomes if you're going to be like the new Twilight Zone, the Substack Zone. It didn't end after one season. They went on to do many, and then there were iterations of the many after that. So you've got at least, by my count, 5 seasons you have to do
Well,
because
and we got to
the
start including
original Twilight
spin-offs.
Zone did 5, right? This then there's the spin-offs, but I'm just thinking about the original 5 seasons. Let's
The,
start
this
there. Let's not get too far ahead of ourselves.
the Shane stack is the spin-off that I want to see. I don't know that we have an answer for that. I think that there's definitely a lot of interest in doing a yearly, foray into it. Whether it's exactly the same or takes on a new life, I think that's certainly up for discussion. I think that the group, we have a really lively Discord chat of all the writers who were a part of it, who have been chiming in about sort of what their thoughts are, and in fact influenced a lot of what we've done from the print side. So I look to that group to help guide whether or not we do it again.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes the one time is enough, and it's the best, as you don't want to mess up the greatness. But I have to say, I think another one is due,
Yeah. Well,
but not till the end of the
there's
year.
definitely the point of diminishing returns, right? Where
Right.
you sort of catch fire in a bottle and all of a sudden, or lightning in a
Yeah.
bottle,
They
and
always say the sequel might not be as good as the original.
yeah. So,
Not to jinx it.
I-
yeah, but and it's a good reason to like think that if we do it again, maybe it's slightly different enough that it's not a one-to-one comparison, right?
Yeah.
That's sort of what you want in sort of the, a new hope to Empire Strikes Back,
Right.
in
well,
that way.
and Jay, I mean, I'm relatively newish to Substack. I haven't been on here too long, but correct me if I'm wrong. I think what you and Sean initiated was really a really interesting experiment. And how you could bring various writers together on this platform and leverage the platform and its community to create this singular work of fiction that is just amazing. And so it's just so astonishing how the variety of content. and
Right.
For
It
sure.
and so I
actually
think it was like kind of a proof of concept in a way that, to your
right.
point, Erica, I hope will be replicated.
Right. It reminded me, honestly, I'm not sure if you're probably familiar with Ben Wakeman, where
Hmm.
he did Same Walk, Different Shoes. It reminded me a lot. He's done that. He did it twice, and
Okay.
that whole concept of everyone giving a story and then they swapped stories, and you got to write a fiction story about someone's real experience.
Yeah,
And so uh, that, and then now this, the Substack Zone, and what will come next, and the idea that it can be so simple and so easy, anyone um, with the drive and the desire to do it and come together and do it can totally do it. And so I hope that there are other, you know, iterations and versions of what you guys managed to do. I do have a question about the title. Because you didn't call it the Substack Zone, you called it the Midnight Vault.
yeah.
Where did the title come from?
Oh, well, just calling it the Substack zone, especially using it in the way that we used it graphically.
Right.
Um, Sean is saying, next up, Tales from the Crypt. By the way, he's
That
he's
would be
he's
awesome.
not he's not crazy, because the idea of taking a beloved concept and transferring it to something else year after year, where it keeps altering and keeps changing, is is not a crazy idea. It's actually like pretty brilliant. Reminds me of a buddy of mine came up with this idea years ago. He was like, "Look, there's a firefighter show, there's a police show, there's a law show, there's whatever." He says, "Why not just hire the same cast?" Right? And in one season, they're all firefighters. And the next season, they're all cops. And the next season, they're all lawyers. And basically, you have this great ensemble cast that's sort of like in the Christopher Guest way of the world, where it's like the Waiting for Guffman and Best in Show and all of that. And you just put them in different situations year after year. We could do largely the same thing with any of these types of, sort of story construction mechanisms or themes.
Mhm.
But I got way off track because
Yeah.
that's not what we were talking about.
No,
The
we were
title.
talking about the Midnight Vault, the title.
Oh yeah, Sean or Shane, do you want to talk about that?
Well, I believe it was based on on a little survey that you created in our Discord. So we opened it up to everyone. Really, I think not using Substack Zone was probably largely due to legal reasons, I suppose.
Right. And I think it helps as well to, not that I don't love Substack myself and love that all the tools that it gives us, but a lot of the time I find myself using the word like everyone knows Substack
Yeah,
and a lot of
Yeah,
people don't. And so I find myself making the conscious effort to remove the word Substack in a lot of what I say and just say publication or newsletter or email instead of
yeah,
saying Substack, like that's the placeholder, because if we leave, if you go somewhere else, if you want to pull in people who aren't in Substack to participate in a project like this, you don't want to make it seem like, well, if you're not in Substack, then you can't be a part of
for
this.
sure.
And so it makes sense that you would have changed it. I just, I love the title. I think the title and the cover art is amazing. So I'm glad that, of all the voting, that was where it landed on
uh,
that
Yeah,
title.
yeah.
very much.
We played a very sort of democratic game with almost everything that we did that were major decisions to be made. I think the only thing that Shane, you and I randomized was like the order of the stories. And
I was
there
going
was
to ask
something
you if
else.
there was
Yeah.
something to the order of the stories. Like, was there a method to that madness, or did you just like throw them up in the air and say, okay, whichever ones that catches, that's the order they're going to be in?
That was sort of it. Yeah, we randomized the stories. We also randomized when we published the first time the order of the stories that are in the header of everybody's story, just so that like I didn't end up front or Sean didn't end up front. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
there's sort of this, because in Western culture we read top to bottom, left to right. Like,
Yep.
I don't want people to just get stuck on one set of stories. So we sort of democratized it in that way. We did the same thing with a number of other decisions along the way, like the coming up with the title. We asked everybody a couple of different times, and then sort of weighted it by like how many votes did each one get, and we did a couple of rounds there. Yeah, I mean, it's just like, I think when you work with a group like this, what Shane and Sean and I talked about pretty early on when we decided we were going to do a book is we need to ask the group uh, questions that are relative to them, but like not leave everything to a group decision, because all of a sudden
Right.
there's no decision made.
Right.
So we brought things back up to the group as they were needed.
Yeah, I mean, if you go through every little detail, then you'll find you're busy waiting on answers on every little detail, and it's
Yes.
hard to move forward. Yeah, I totally get that. So now let's talk a little bit more about the Twilight Zone specifically, because this was what brought you all together. So I would love to know from Shane and from Jay what your um, love of Twilight Zone was that brought you to want to do this project. Because, like you said, it could have been Tales of the Crypt, it could have been
Sure.
anything, but it was Twilight Zone that brought you together. Um, so I would love to hear your personal stories on your relationship with the Twilight Zone.
Sure. Well, I'll start. I have very vivid memories of watching the show with my dad when I was a kid. We'd watch reruns of the show, and it's just such a I mean, it's obviously just got such solid storytelling. I feel like even when I rewatched a lot of the older episodes, kind of in preparation to write my piece for the Substack Zone submission, I was just like, man, this stuff still holds up so well. Even in an age where production value on even the simplest show is so over the top.
Hmm.
We live in an age where just special effects are assumed to be a part of it. And those shows were very simple, but the stories really carried them, and I love that about the show. And then just being able actually, I want to tell a little anecdote here. Told my father about the project, and he said, he's like, man, that gremlin's face in the airplane window scared the hell out of me. I couldn't sleep for days, and it haunts me to this very day.
Yeah, Nightmare at 20,000 feet.
Yeah, it's one
Hmm.
of the best episodes. A young
Yeah.
William Shatner. But getting invited to this project was, and knowing kind of who was leading it, the chance to write alongside Sean and Jay and all the other writers. It could have been just about any topic, to be honest, and I would have said yes in a heartbeat. So it's a heck of an opportunity.
Yeah. Sean, maybe you can correct me, but I think, because I see you still online, um, I think we kept the list of who all the writers were hidden from each other, from the rest of the writers, for a good while
Yeah,
before
initially.
we needed to make sure that everybody was moving forward with their stories, and we were getting regular updates. That way it was sort of like, we don't know how many we're going to get out of this, because writers are notoriously bad with deadlines. You
Right.
know, um, uh, two things. One is, I am like this huge Ray Bradbury fan, and so growing up watching the Twilight Zone was, to me, it was like Ray Bradbury theater. And he notably did Sing the Body Electric as an episode. I think he wrote the script for it, and it was one of my favorite episodes, where it sort of has this melancholy through the story, where these kids grow up with this robotic grandmother, and all of a sudden the kids are now older, and what does this robotic grandmother do with her life, and where does she go, and all of those things. And I just loved sort of the how you could tell a story in such a compact space, and it could be a morality play, it could be meaningful, it could be like a jab in the gut, about sort of your biases and your reactions to what the world looks like, and it all fit under the umbrella of, maybe it was horror, maybe it was science fiction, maybe it was just two people sitting at a diner talking about sort of those people, and they're sort of having this guarded conversation, and you sort of think that it's a racial conversation, but you realize that it's two aliens talking to each other, and the one guy, lifts his hat and he's got a third eye,
Right.
like the undertones for the Twilight Zone were really what hooked me. The overt stuff, which was it was about aliens, and it was about things that go bump in the night and all of that, was sort of the icing on the cake for me.
Mm,
So that's the first thing that you asked about Substack and calling it the Substack zone and why we didn't do it there. I think it's really important. A lot of us are in love with sort of the audience that we're creating within Substack, and the platform as a whole has been really beneficial for a lot of writers. But we have to remember that it's just a platform,
right.
right? It just happens to be the one that is in vogue for us today.
Hmm.
You go back a ways and you think about like Wattpad or Medium or any of these other ones. Everybody has their day, and for us to tie these pieces of art directly to the platform feels disingenuous to the art that was created. And so the Midnight Vault and the naming of it was just a way of us saying, not only for litigious reasons, but like, let's just step away from calling it Substack
Hmm.
specific. But we did, like, in the acknowledgments, we did call out Chris Best, we called out Mills and Hamish for creating this really great platform,
Right.
because it brought all of us together, and we think that that's a really special thing.
Right. Okay. So I know you had asked me to ask a question of the audience because you're going to do, and I think because I saw that you've already been talking about it in Substack notes, but a giveaway. You're going to give away 5 ebooks. And
Yeah.
I've been racking my brain to find out what question could I ask the people to answer. And I never actually got any more details with you on was it supposed to be a question that there's only one answer and everyone has to give the one answer, or a general question that let people answer how they want and there is no right or wrong answer? Um,
I think it's up to you. Uh, it could be Substack, or sorry, it could be Twilight Zone specific.
yeah,
I tell you
because
what. I tell
I
you what.
was
Let's do an easy one. Uh, how about anybody outside of the writers who are on the chat? I see now can enter. Anybody except for those people can enter. Uh, just tell us your favorite Twilight Zone episode.
that was going to be my question. I was like, because
See,
if you want a generic, a one that I think everyone can answer is like, what is your favorite one? And I would be most interested to hear the ones that aren't the top 30 or the best, right? Because there's the ones that everyone knows, and then there are the ones that are, that not everyone knows, but that hit you a certain way for a certain reason. So you might like that one. Um, but yeah, I'd love to hear it. So if you want to leave that comment. Um,
yeah, and we'll let Erica. You get to pick out who the winners are.
Oh, okay. Whoa. So
Yeah,
that's a lot of power. Yeah, so when this episode comes out, which will be in like a half an hour after we end this, I will send the email out in the comments. Put your answer there. Don't put it here in this chat because unfortunately, which is weird, the chat doesn't live on forever after you do
yeah.
and on demand. So if you ask people to do stuff in the chat, it's not like when you go to the video on demand, you can see what chat was happening. You can't. So don't put it in this chat. Hold it and put it in the comments. Otherwise, I won't be able to see it later, unfortunately. Okay, so let's circle back to the question you didn't want to answer before.
Yeah,
I'm
I, I
putting
would
you
I
back
would
on you and Shane and Sean, who's in the room.
Yeah.
When's
I,
the
I
next
I would
one?
love to do it again. I think if we did it again, we would tie it to some other notable date. I think that giving everybody a focus point, right? So the way that the 66th anniversary of the Twilight Zone worked out, giving everybody a focus point, like we're going to drop everybody's stories at 12:01 a.m. on the
Right.
24th of November, like that sort of pointed all the boats in the right direction. Uh, if we do something else outside of the Twilight Zone, like that's also a good way to sort of point all the boats. I,
Right.
I do want to point out one really interesting fact. So I've been chatting back and forth with some of the folks at the Rod Serling Foundation, which is a nonprofit out of New York, and they pointed out a factual error that I knew about, but I sort of skipped over when we chose the date.
Okay. Can I try to guess because I think I
Yeah.
know what it is because I was gonna have a bone to pick with you guys about the date too. And I was like, you know what? They're already this deep into the water here. I'm gonna
Yeah.
just take a step back because technically it
Uh-huh.
wasn't the date that you're saying. It that actually would be this year, I believe.
Yeah, yes.
And it
So
would be, I
the
believe, in October, not November.
That's right. Yeah.
If we're
So
looking
the
if we're looking at the the
yeah,
technical
yeah. If
when
we're
it
looking at
aired
this,
and the date. Yeah.
so the original sort of pilot
Right.
that CBS had asked for, that Rod Serling did, which was the time. Oh, the names escaped me now. Uh, Aired on November 24th, 1958, and it sort of sat there, and CBS hadn't made a decision. And it wasn't, and this is the factual part of it, right? It wasn't until 6,000 letters showed up at CBS saying, we want more of that, that they made a decision. And that put the Twilight Zone into motion the following year.
Yep.
So both are still true. They're still, when the series started to air in 1959, but there's also this pilot episode, and that's the one we chose.
Yep. Yep. Because when I saw that, I was like, wait, that doesn't. Let me go back to my memory of what's going on here. But I was like, they're sticking with that date, so that's fine. But
Yeah.
technically, but it's the whole project came together, which is all that to me, all that matters. So I'm just so thrilled. I hope people will go out and buy it. I hope you see that and that triggers you to want to do another one, or even if it doesn't, don't tease
Oh.
everyone that you have it in your hands when the rest of us don't. It's rude.
One more thing that I think was really interesting that we found out along the way. A software engineer that I worked with a number of years ago chatted me up on LinkedIn when he saw that said we did all these stories, and they're all based on sort of thematically the Twilight Zone. And he chatted me up and he goes, my dad did the original Twilight Zone artwork.
So
And
cool.
his name is Joe Meserly. So if you go to joemeserly.com, you can see the original artwork that he created for the show. I guess it was UPA Studio at the time. Um, just happenstance that we sort of run in these interesting circles where
Right.
tangentially we're sort of, it's that six degrees of separation, right? Where person that we know had a hand in those things.
And how amazing that it was just last November that you guys did this, and then here we are several months later, and Substack gives us the ability to chat about it
Yeah,
live and do this. Because
for sure.
if memory serves, that I think this time, November of last year, I think only a handful of people had the ability to go live. They didn't push it out to everyone just yet. So, I'm grateful that they did that so that we could have this conversation like this openly and with everyone in the room. If anyone has any questions before we sign off, I should have mentioned that before. Please do ask them in the chat, and we will or they will
Yeah.
answer them. I don't have any answers for you.
So, Erica, I
Yes.
also have to say thank you to you because
Hmm.
you helped push a lot of eyes to the Substack Zone, and we're like incredibly thankful for
Oh,
your
of
time and
course.
effort and interest in what we were doing.
Yeah, I mean, you guys were the catalyst for me to say I can help other people do this. Like you guys said, if you hadn't said yes, I probably would have been like, when I see these things happen, I won't offer my assistance. But because you said yes, I went out, and now every time I hear that someone's doing a project similar to yours, gathering a group of people, putting together all these stories, I use you as my blueprint. Look, I helped the Substack
Yeah,
zone. If you guys want me to do the same thing, I can do the same thing. That's what I think. That's why I created Top in Fiction, was for this very reason,
yeah,
was to help people not just share the stories that they're putting on Substack, but to go beyond it and to take their story off of Substack and put it
Mm,
into a print form, into an ebook, sell it or don't sell it, hold it in your hands just for you, whatever the case may be. Like that's
mhm.
that's my goal with Top and Fiction. And so when you guys said you were going to put it in book form, I said, "Oh, I got to talk to them because that's the dream. You get together with a group of people who you have a common interest, you write stories together, you share it with the world, and then you put it together in a collection and voila.
Yeah.
And you didn't need any gatekeepers to do that. You did it
No.
all just because you were determined and you had the passion to do it. And that's great.
Yeah. And I get a little teary-eyed thinking about it, but like this is exactly what we should be. Oh, sorry, Sean. Yep. Automatic writer.
Look at
You
that.
happen to see it. But this is exactly what uh, authors hope for, right? This is like a place to get your work seen, a place to find some camaraderie and to be viewed by other writers and other readers, and then hopefully to make your own leap. I wrote a note about this the other day about being bullish about like independent authors who are wanting to control their own destiny. This is exactly what I'm talking about. Like I didn't do this alone. Shane didn't do this alone. Sean didn't do this alone. We did it together,
Hmm.
but like we're all together moving those things forward and doing it for ourselves. And Sean's put out books, and a number of the other writers that are on the in the anthology have put out their own books, like
Right.
through sheer force of will, and that's amazing to me.
Hmm.
Yeah, well,
That's the best. So thank you again for hopping on with me. Hopefully we'll do this again.
Yeah,
For the next one. You'll let us in when that happens. I'm not gonna say if, I'm gonna say when. When it happens. I'm not saying if anymore.
I
When
said
it happens. So thank you. Thank you, Sean, for being in the room and I wanted you to come on too. And I think I had said to you, Jay, do you think we could get Sean on? And I can't remember where we landed on with that, but yeah, I wanted to get as many, as we could, but I'm so glad I got both of you on here. The person who helped put it together with the project management, and then Shane who did like so much of the artwork. Thank you so much. Hey, Jay, I love project management. Like I'm the spreadsheet person. Like I spreadsheet my
that's
whole
right.
life.
That's
Like I've
right.
got spreadsheets for everything. So I get how that is a helpful part of the process. So
Until you're
thank
to the
you.
point where you have a spreadsheet to manage your spreadsheets,
Right.
then we'll talk.
Yeah, yeah, and all the formulas and the calculations for it. So thank you again for coming on. I appreciate it. All good luck and success with this and any of your other future writings. So thank you.
Thank you,
thank-
I
Erica.
think
Thanks for
that's
having
it.
us.
yeah,
All
thank
right. Bye.
Bye.